Every WW2 U-boat captain ranked, from junk to legend. Today, we're ranking the most consequential U-boat captains of the Second World War. From the commander who suffered a psychological collapse and refused to sail again, to the tonnage ace who sank 47 Allied ships in 18 months and survived his own war, to become a senior admiral in the West German Navy. A note before we begin. The men who commanded German U-boats fought the most lethal war of any military service in history. 75% of German submarine crews died at sea between 1939 and 1945. Of the 40,000 men who served aboard U-boats, 30,000 never came home. The captains on this list were not, in most cases, evil men. Many were professional naval officers doing a professional naval job. Some committed war crimes. Others rescued survivors. This ranking is based on their combat records, their operational conduct, and their impact on the Battle of the Atlantic. Comments will be open at the end. Bring your arguments. D tier, the worst. The captains whose careers ended in collapse, rank 8. Heinrich Bleichrodt. Let's start at the bottom. Heinrich Bleichrodt commanded U-48 and later U-109, and in the opening years of the war, he was a competent commander with a respectable tonnage record. Picture this. It is 1943. The Battle of the Atlantic has turned. Allied air cover reaches almost every part of the ocean. Radar-equipped aircraft find U-boats at night. Decrypted Enigma signals track Wolfpack positions. Bleichrodt's boat has been depth-charged repeatedly. He has watched crews he trained die in explosions and drowning. He returns to base and refuses to sail again. He tells his superiors he cannot lead men to certain death. In an air force or an army, this admission might have led to a court-martial. In the U-boat arm, Karl Dönitz understood what his captains were going through and did not punish Bleichrodt formally. He was quietly transferred to shore duties and spent the rest of the war training new officers. Bleichrodt survived the war and lived until 1977. He sits at the bottom of this list not because he was cowardly, but because his career ended when he could no longer function. A commander whose war ended before his war ended. Rank 7. Herbert Werner, the survivor. Herbert Werner commanded U-612 and later U-953 from 1943 onwards, joining the U-boat arm at the exact moment its effective operational life was ending. His memoir, Iron Coffins, published in 1969, became one of the most read submarine memoirs in any language and shaped Western understanding of the U-boat war for a generation. Werner survived the war. That in itself, given the timing of his service, is extraordinary. He commanded during the collapse of the U-boat campaign, when boats were being sunk at a rate that made every patrol a coin flip against death. His combat record is modest. He sank a handful of merchant ships and one warship, mostly during his final desperate patrols in 1944 and 1945. So why is he in D tier? Because Werner's actual combat impact on the Battle of the Atlantic was small. His fame rests on his book, on his eloquence, and on his role as a witness to the U-boat arm's destruction, rather than on his tonnage. A captain who survived the war he was sent to lose, and told the story better than most who did. C tier, the overrated. Captains whose peaks came early and could not be sustained. Rank 6. Reinhard Hartigan, the Operation Drumbeat commander. Reinhard Hartigan commanded U-123 during Operation Paukenschlag, the German U-boat offensive against American shipping along the east coast of the United States in January 1942. In 2 patrols during the first 6 months of the war with America, Hartigan sank 22 Allied ships totaling over 115,000 tons, silhouetting American merchant vessels against the still-lit lights of American coastal cities that had not yet imposed blackout regulations. American losses during the drumbeat period were catastrophic and largely due to Hartigan's success. So why is he in C tier? Because Hartigan's career effectively ended after drumbeat. He was withdrawn from combat command and spent the rest of the war in training and staff positions. His combat record is dominated by the single extraordinary window when he encountered an unprepared enemy. When the environment changed, Hartigan was already elsewhere. A commander whose greatest weeks came at the moment his enemy was at its most vulnerable, and who was never tested when the odds became fair. Rank 5. Erich Topp. The Red Devil boat. Erich Topp commanded U-552. Nicknamed the Red Devil boat for the Red Devil emblem painted on its conning tower. Between 1941 and 1942, Top sank 35 Allied ships, totaling nearly 200,000 tons, placing him among the top-scoring U-boat aces of the war. He was awarded the Knight's Cross with oak leaves and swords. His combat career was genuinely brilliant. So why is he only at number 5? Because Top's post-Knight's Cross career was spent in training commands and design work rather than in continued frontline combat, and his political trajectory after the war complicates his ranking. He served in the West German Navy after 1958, rose to the rank of Rear Admiral in the NATO command structure, and wrote a memoir that some historians have criticized for its self-serving account of his wartime record. Top died in 2005, a superb combat commander whose reputation is muddied by what he wrote about himself afterwards. B tier. The Great. Captains who fought hard and paid the price. Rank 4. Wolfgang Luth, the second highest tonnage ace of the war. Wolfgang Luth commanded U-138, U-43, and U-181, across a career that spanned from 1940 to 1944. He sank 46 ships, totaling over 225,000 tons, a record second only to Otto Kretschmer in the entire U-boat arm. Luth's specialization was long-range patrols, often lasting over 200 days at sea, in which he ranged into the Indian Ocean, along the African coast, and into waters other U-boat captains never reached. He was famous for maintaining crew morale on these extraordinary voyages, through personal attention, careful management of food and water, and unusual attentiveness to the psychological state of his men. He was awarded the Knight's Cross with oak leaves, swords, and diamonds, the highest German military decoration, and was one of only 2 U-boat officers to receive it. His ending is one of the strangest in the war. On the 14th of May, 1945, after Germany had already surrendered, Luth was returning to his quarters at the Naval Academy at Flensburg-Meerwijk. A German sentry challenged him. Luth did not respond because he was thinking about something else, and the nervous young sentry shot and killed him. He was buried with full military honors in the presence of Grand Admiral Karl Dönitz, a great commander who survived the war and was killed by one of his own men in the peace. Rank 3. Günther Prien, the Bull of Scapa Flow. On the night of the 13th of October 1939, Günther Prien commanded U-47 into the anchorage of the British Home Fleet at Scapa Flow in the Orkney Islands, torpedoed the battleship HMS Royal Oak, and escaped without being detected. 833 British sailors died. The attack was one of the most audacious naval operations of the entire war, and it made Prien the first German U-boat celebrity of the conflict. He was awarded the Knight's Cross personally by Hitler. He was interviewed in newsreels. His book Mein Weg nach Scapa Flow became a bestseller. Between 1939 and 1941, Prien sank over 30 ships totaling nearly 200,000 tons. He was one of the 3 top-scoring aces of the early war, along with Kretschmer and Schepke, in what German propaganda called the Golden Trio. He was killed on the 7th of March 1941 when U-47 vanished during an attack on convoy OB-293 in the North Atlantic. The exact cause of his loss has never been established. His death, along with the loss of Schepke 10 days later, effectively ended the first great phase of the U-boat war. A commander who wrote himself into naval history in one night at Scapa Flow, and then paid the price of celebrity by disappearing into the ocean he had made famous. A tier, legendary, the ace who died in battle at his own peak. Rank 2, Joachim Schepke, the youngest of the Golden Trio. Joachim Schepke commanded U-100 and later U-119. Between 1939 and 1941, Schepke sank 37 Allied ships, totaling over 150,000 tons. He was aggressive to the point of recklessness, famous within the U-boat arm for closing to point-blank range and firing at ships from inside their own escort screens. On the night of the 17th of March 1941, Schepke's U-100 was detected by the British destroyer HMS Vanoc, which rammed the U-boat as it surfaced. Schepke was crushed to death in his conning tower during the collision. He was 28 years old. His death, 10 days after Prien's disappearance, was a devastating blow to German U-boat morale. 2 of the 3 faces of the U-boat celebrity war were gone within a fortnight. Schepke sits at number 2, because his combat record was extraordinary in absolute terms, because he died at his operational peak rather than tapering off, and because his death is one of the defining images of the U-boat war. A commander who fought too closely and paid for it with his life at the exact moment his career was at its highest point. S-tier, untouchable, the tonnage ace who lived, rank 1, Otto Kretschmer. And now we arrive at the top. Otto Kretschmer commanded U-23 and later U-99 between 1939 and March 1941. In 18 months of combat, he sank 47 ships, totaling over 274,000 tons, the highest tonnage record of any U-boat captain in the entire war. Kretschmer was a revolutionary tactical thinker. He was one of the first commanders to attack Allied convoys on the surface at night, using his U-boat's low silhouette and greater surface speed to slip inside the escort screen, fire torpedoes at multiple ships in a single approach, and escape before the escorts could react. His method, one torpedo per ship, no wasted shots, aimed at the largest targets in the convoy first, became doctrine across the U-boat arm. He sank 3 armed merchant cruisers in a single month, one of the most extraordinary anti-shipping records in naval history. He was awarded the Knight's Cross with oak leaves and swords, and would have received diamonds had his career not ended when it did. On the 17th of March 1941, the same night Shepke was killed, Kretschmer's U-99 was depth-charged and forced to the surface by the British destroyer HMS Walker. Kretschmer surrendered the boat rather than let his men die. He spent the rest of the war in Canadian and British prisoner of war camps, where he was universally respected by his captors and even organized a naval intelligence course for his fellow prisoners. He was released in 1947, joined the West German Navy in 1955, and rose to the rank of flotillan admiral before his retirement. He died in a boating accident on the Danube in 1998. Kretschmer earns the top tier because his combat record has never been matched, because his tactical innovations changed how submarine warfare was conducted for decades afterwards, and because he survived the war the men around him did not survive. A commander who sank more Allied tonnage than any submariner in history, and who lived long enough to command peacetime NATO ships in the same waters where his U-boat had once hunted. That is the ranking. From Heinrich Bleichrodt, a commander whose war ended when his nerve did, to Otto Kretschmer, the tonnage ace whose record has stood for 80 years and will almost certainly stand forever. If you enjoyed this video, the one on screen now is for you. Subscribe, hit the bell, and tell us in the comments which U-boat captain you would have ranked differently. We read every single one.